Hi, my name is Patrick Woodhead, the lead on Filecoin Beam, and this tutorial is on egress pricing and credits. Egress. Not the most exciting word in the English language, but if you're building anything that stores data and serves it to users, understanding how egress gets measured and billed will save you real money down the line. So what does egress actually mean? Every time someone downloads something from your storage, data moves outward. That outward movement is egress. Upload is ingress. Download is egress. Simple as that. Now think about this. You store a video file and 1,000 people watch it. The file got stored once, but it left 1,000 times. Those 1,000 departures, that's your egress. And that's exactly where costs start stacking up for high traffic applications. Now, the way Filecoin Onchain Cloud measures this is pretty simple. Bytes transferred out, that's it. Someone requests a file. If it's in the CDN, in the cache, the CDN delivers that file, and the system logs exactly how many bytes moved between the CDN and the user during that delivery. If the file is not in the CDN's cache, then the CDN Filecoin Beam will go fetch it from the storage provider. And the system tallies up exactly how many bytes move between the storage provider and Filecoin Beam, and between Filecoin Beam and the end user. And you add up all those transfers, and you have your total egress for the period. No complicated formulas, no hidden multipliers, no gotchas buried in the fine print. Let's assume that there's 50 GB of data stored in Filecoin Beam in the cache. If your user downloads 50 GB of this data for the month, the total egress is 50 GB. Clean and straightforward. Let's say that there's no data stored in the cache. The user downloads 50 GB of data, and it all is proxied back to the underlying storage provider. So that's 50 GB of data transferred between the storage provider and Filecoin Beam, and 50 GB transferred between Filecoin Beam and the end user. And your egress is 100 GB. Clean and straightforward. And here's something worth knowing. The tracking happens through the Beam verifier contract, which means every single delivery gets recorded on chain with the exact byte count. You can audit this yourself anytime you want. The data is completely public. All right, let's talk pricing. Egress runs at up to $14 per TIB. Scale that down and it works out to about $0.015 per GB. To put that in perspective, if you drop one USDFC into your egress balance, you've just covered roughly 71.5 GB of downloads. For most applications, that's pretty decent runway. Now, storage is a separate thing entirely. Storage runs on a monthly basis with its own rate. Egress is purely pay per access, which means you only pay for data that actually gets downloaded. Nothing sitting idle costs you egress fees over a monthly basis. The whole system works on a prepaid credits model. You deposit USDFC into your Filecoin Pay account, and downloads draw against that balance automatically. Think of it like putting money on a transit card. You load it up front, rides deduct as you take them, and you top it off when it runs low. Same idea here. One thing worth knowing up front though, the first time you create a CDN-enabled dataset, there's a 1 USDFC setup fee. But that's a one-time thing per dataset. After that initial hit, you're just paying for actual egress going forward. And top-ups can happen whenever you want. Running low, add more. Got a balance sitting unused? It stays right there in your account with no expiration. The money doesn't disappear. Setting this up is actually seamless. Credits fold into the same deposit flow you already used for storage. When you call the deposit and approval function through the Synapse SDK, you're funding a single account that covers both storage fees and egress charges. If you're using CDN delivery through Beam, you just enable that flag when creating your storage context. The system then knows to route retrievals through the CDN network and bill egress accordingly. No separate egress account to manage, no extra contracts to interact with, just one funding pool with multiple services drawing from it as needed. Now let's talk about estimating your costs, because this is where it gets practical. The math goes like this. Figure out how much data you expect to serve per month. Not how much you're storing, how much is actually leaving. Say you're running a media platform where the average user streams about 500 MB of content monthly, and you've got 1,000 active users. That works out at 500 GB of egress per month. At up to $14 per TIB, you're looking at around $7 monthly just for egress. Storage costs sit on top of that separately. Whatever you have sitting in storage gets billed at the storage rate per month, regardless of how much or how little actually gets downloaded. Here's something interesting though. The ratio between your storage and egress costs tell you a lot about the nature of your application. Heavy read traffic relative to storage size, egress is going to dominate your bill. Archival use case where data rarely gets pulled, storage becomes your main expense. Knowing which camp you fall into helps you plan. Now there's one important distinction that I want to make sure is clear. Egress billing only kicks in when you're using CDN delivery. Standard retrieval that goes directly from storage providers to your users, that's bundled into your storage cost already. No separate egress charges for that path. And you get to pick per dataset whether to enable CDN or not. Some datasets might genuinely need the global delivery performance. Others might be perfectly fine with standard retrieval. You can mix and match based on what each piece of content actually needs. CDN makes the most sense when you have users spread across different regions, when you need consistent fast delivery times, when your traffic patterns are spiky and unpredictable, or when your files are large enough that the caching benefits really pay off. Standard retrieval makes more sense for infrequent access patterns, geographically concentrated user bases, back-end services where latency tolerance is high, or content that simply doesn't need edge caching. For keeping tabs on all this, Filecoin Pay tracks your balance and what's been spent in real time. You can query your account info through the SDK to see current funds, how much is locked up in the storage commitments, and what's available for egress. The Onchain verifier also records every delivery event. So if you want granular visibility into exactly what's being downloaded, when it's happening, and how much it's costing, that data exists and it's accessible. Build dashboards against it, set up alerts, whatever fits your ops workflow. Now, before I wrap up, a few patterns that help keep costs predictable. Cache aggressively on your own application layer if you can. Every request you serve from your own cache is one less egress request hitting your bill. Structure your content in reasonably sized chunks rather than giant monolithic files. Smaller chunks give the CDN cache more opportunities to stay warm and serve repeat requests efficiently. Keep an eye on your high traffic pieces. If one file is eating most of your egress budget, maybe that's fine and expected, or maybe there's an optimization sitting there waiting to be found. And seriously consider whether all your content actually needs CDN delivery. The flexibility to mix standard and CDN retrieval per dataset exists exactly for this reason. Use it. At different scales, the math breaks down pretty simply. A small application doing 100 gigs of monthly egress is looking at roughly $1.40. A medium application doing 1 TB monthly, $14. A larger application pushing 10 TBs monthly, up to $140. It scales linearly from there. No volume discounts built into the base rate, but also no surprise fees and no minimum commitments. Predictable unit economics all the way up the curve. So that's egress pricing on Filecoin Beam and the Filecoin Onchain cloud. Up to $14 per TIB transferred out through Filecoin Beam, the CDN. Prepaid credits drawn from your USDCFC deposits. A one-time setup fee when you first create a CDN dataset. Top up whenever you need to. Measured in bytes, recorded on chain. Charged automatically against your balance. Simple enough to estimate before your build, transparent enough to audit after you launch, and flexible enough to optimize as your traffic patterns evolve over time. That's it. That's the model. Now go build something.